Happen on the Job, our podcast for entertaining and sometimes relevant conversations with contractors. My name is Mike. With me, as always, is Brian.
How's it going?
Today with us, we have Kevin Hempel. Is it Hempel? Hempel? I probably should have cleared that up before we started this, right?
It's whatever you want to call it. You know, that was my name by birth. But when people say like, "Where'd you come from? Where'd your name come?" There's a whole story behind that. So it's
maybe we'll get into that too. But
yeah, I will accept whatever you want.
Yeah. So we'll get it spelled right on the website at least. So that way, at least we got it spelled right if we're not saying it right. But
I'm cool with that. The one thing I always tell everybody is they're like, I've never met anybody with 2 E's in their first name, like Kevin. And I'm like, yeah. I go, even if you don't remember my name, I'm going to make sure that you remember who I am somehow, some way you're going to remember.
That's so funny because Brian actually does all the technical stuff of this and gets it posted. And I saw him writing your name down on his piece of paper next to me here with the I in. And I made sure I cleared it up with him. Because we don't want to get that done. Yeah,
and I made the correction.
Nice. Yeah, if the name doesn't do it, the blue mohawk does. And if that doesn't do it, then whatever that insanity exists.
Finding a way to make an imprint.
100%. So
give us a little history. I know typically for those 7 people that actually listen to multiple podcasts of ours,
I think it's 8.
Yeah, we might have 10. A few more now, but. For those that do listen to multiple, you're obviously not a current contractor per se, but are in the field. So give us a little history, kind of how you got started and how you got to where you are now.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, when I was like 6 months old, my parents put a hammer in my hand and said, "Go build our house." No. I was working way back when, and it was like 2000. Or 98 or so. I was working at going to high school, working in UPS, doing a couple small odds and ends jobs. And I want to say it was like somewhere about 1999. I spoke to a friend and he said, "Hey, have you ever tried roofing?" And I was living on the East Coast in New Hampshire, and I was like, "What's that?" And so he brought me out to this project where I had to walk. They pulled out a 40-foot ladder, walked up on top of the roof, walked across the roof, and he says, "Hey, this is roofing. Like, you can get up here. This is the hardest part of the job." And at the time, I just actually pulled out my pay stubs. I was making like $12 an hour working for a semiconductor company, and this guy offered me like $15, and I didn't have to drive as far. So I was like, "Sweet, like that's good. I'll do that." So I got into the roofing industry sometime around 99, 2000, and then within a couple of weeks was running crews for that company. Soon after that, I got involved with a barn building company. So I was living on site with a bunch of guys in campers, and we were building barns, like big post and beam barns. And that's crazy. So I was working there like 5 or 6 days a week, just around the clock. And little cool thing, crazy thing that we do when we're just starting out. Every Wednesday we would go to the local strip bar and people would spend money and get drunk. But I ended up not doing that. Like I didn't want to go that route. I realized quickly that I had the ability and I had some smarts in my head. So kept working, doing that stuff. And then in the construction arena, multifamily stuff while I was out there in the East Coast as well. And then in 2003, I flipped a quarter and said, "Heads California, tails Florida." And it landed on California. I came out for 6 weeks. That's where kind of the whole journey begins in construction, really construction. Ended up falling in love with a city called Livermore, California, which is just outside of San Francisco. Got a job as a superintendent, was getting paid like $13 an hour. So I moved 3,000 miles away to get paid $13 an hour and started running projects as a super for a local GC in town and fell in love with technology at the same time. And then my girlfriend at the time, which is now continues to be my wife, she had said, "Hey, you kind of need to get your stuff together and go get a real job." And so I went back to school and ended up finding a job at the same time working for a GC company in 2005. And then that company literally went from $2 million a year to just around $20 million a year.
Wow.
At that company, I started out as a laborer, went to a carpenter, then went to a foreman, then project supervisor, superintendent, production manager, senior estimator, like did a whole bunch of slew of stuff. And until it got to a point where nobody really knew what I did. I just kind of sat around. But I've seen a lot of projects during that time, and I fell in love with technology. So I stayed in the construction arena. went to school as a construction manager, seeing how that was happening in the industry. And then decided in 2013 that I would leave that company. And the end of 2013, I jumped in with another paint company who was starting an energy company. So I wanted to get into solar. So I got into solar. I ran like almost $1 million project there, did a bunch of stuff here in California with that. And then started my consulting company in construction with those things, and just had so much background as a project manager that it just worked. Kept in contact, always working with multifamily industry in the construction world, and did that for a little bit, consulting, and got into technology, helped some startup companies. A friend of mine ended up being on the Shark Tank. That was fun stuff. And then awesome. In 2018, got called back into the construction industry in the Bay Area. And now that's where I currently work. I work for a general contractor, Freestone Reconstruction out of Fremont. And then they have a sister company, B. Taylor Painting. My official title there is like Director of Client Relations or Marketing or Business Development or something. But really, it's anything and everything that allows us to have better relationships with our clients. So if it's a project that I have to manage, that's what I'll do. If it's a contract conversation, that's what I'll do. If it's digital marketing, that's what I do. If it's listening to a client talk about how they're struggling with their, at-home education with their kids now, that's what I do.
Anything and everything, huh?
Anything and everything. It's who I am. You'll recognize if you Google my name, I leave a ton of stuff out on social media and on Google. It's like, I don't even carry business cards anymore, because if anybody wants to find me, it's like, just Google me. And if you can't find me there, then like, I don't know if we should be working together.
That's what kind of the first comment I was going to make. There's a lot to unpack there, but I was just going to say, it's got to be tough to kind of trim down your resume at this point, right?
Yeah, 100%.
It sounds like you probably don't also need one.
Yeah, it's exactly it. I did a talk down in I don't know if you guys are part of CAI down in SoCal, but I got invited this past year to speak down at with an attorney down in Newport Beach, and we were talking about digital media, social media, and all that stuff. I've been like the guy that people go to for that stuff. And I've been called like a guru for it. And I'm like, whatever, don't call me an expert. I'm always scared about people who think themselves are experts. And I don't believe to ever be an expert. It's constant learning. But something I said while I was down there in front of it, like it was a room full of attorneys and contractors in the industry. I literally said, I have a belief that I will never write a resume again, because I keep my resume Instagram ready.
Right.
And what that means is that like I literally put stuff out there personally and professionally. I run the risk of people thinking that I'm a weirdo and that I'm insane, but I'm okay with that, because the reality is somebody asks me, how do I find a job? How do I find work? And I just say, how did you find me? And they're like, on social. And I'm like, okay, then that's how I find it.
Yeah. So do you see yourself, you said you're working for Freestone and B. Taylor, right?
Yep.
Now, do you see yourself kind of riding it out with them, or is it like, are you contracted with them for a short period of time to kind of do certain things, or how does that work for you, from a company to company transition and stuff?
It's a great question. So yeah, I writing out, I watch words, and so I listen to a lot of words. So when you said write it out, that is definitely not something I am doing. I like to find the person that's going to drive the train and then jump on the train with them and go, hey, let's keep it going. Glass always full type of guy. But with Freestone and B. Taylor, though, that team and that culture is just absolutely amazing. Like I think I've worked for probably 6 to 8 different companies in my life. And this particular team has something special because we're building it off of service. And so not just like, oh, we're a service company, it's service with the capital SERVICE. And to do that, it's a deeper aspect. And so I don't currently ever see myself leaving the company. However, I also know that and have a true faith and belief that we don't have a lot of control over what happens in life. We only have control over what is being given for opportunity. And when that opportunity hits and is there, I then look at it and go, based off of where we're at, is this part of our plan? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no. So that's pretty. So that kind of clears it up. So they've hired you to do what you do, not necessarily, hey, come in and fix this, and when it's done, we don't need you anymore. It's more, hey, we see what the value of what you do is. We want you as part of this team, and then, you know, throw gas on it and let it burn and take it off, right?
That's exactly it. That is exactly it. And you know, it's never just me. Like, teams don't grow and companies don't grow because of one person. It can get accelerated and have exponential growth by the proper leadership and team getting all put together. You get what I'm saying there? Like,
oh yeah, for sure.
Everybody has to play an intricate part in the process of growth. Like, if I called one of my team members before I got on this call to say, hey, what's the one best thing about me and what's the one worst thing about me? And his literal words were, Kevin, the best thing about you is that you're so optimistic and you're so positive all the time. You're like a motivator, right? But the worst thing about you is that you're so optimistic and so positive all the time. And I said, why is that? And he goes, that's probably because of me, right? Because I'm a bit of a pessimist. And I was like, okay. And then he goes, but you're always glass half full. And I go, wait a second. His name's Mitchell. And I go, wait a second, Mitchell. Here's what I think. Here's what I see. Me as a person, professionally and personally, I am always glass half full, but I actually always think that it's always full. And he said, please explain. And I said, some people think that the glass is empty. Some people think that the glass is full, but I like half full. But I always think that is always full, because even if it's filled with rocks, if it's filled with dirt, if it's filled with soil, you still have air. And it's what you do with that air that matters.
Yeah. Yeah. And going back to kind of what you're saying about the team, it's so funny because so many of these, and I don't know if it's a reflection of where they're at or what it is. I mean, there's somebody said that we've, I mean, to be transparent, we've put this out there and we've asked hundreds or thousands probably of contractors in California to come on and be guests here. And we're obviously getting a lot of people to respond, but it seems like the people are the most eager and most willing to respond and want to get on and jump on this are those that have started at one spot and are now at another spot where they've grown exponentially. I mean, not to say that we don't want to, we'd happy to talk to anybody, but it seems like those that are willing to do that are those kind of people. And those kind of people are always saying the same thing about team and culture and you know, that culture, I guess, inside their company that has gotten to that point. And I think, you know, kind of to what you're saying there, that's a big piece of making that thing grow and making it succeed.
Yeah, man, it's a mind shift change, right? Like, we have to, you know, a lot of times company owners and leadership and managers say, like, you know, I want the company to grow, or I want our teams to grow, and I want this and I want that. But the reality is, like, people can talk about it and then people can do it. There's a difference between the talking and the action. And it's such a fine line, because even I myself, like, how positive and how optimistic and everything that you know, that you could hear from me, there are still things that happen every day that I'm like, man, I could be more optimistic about that. Like, you guys are doing this podcast right now and reaching out and do all these things. I've got a podcast as well that I continue to do, but there are some days where I'm just like, I don't want to do that right now. Like, that's not my creative self. So, you know, it's interesting how it all grows. It's very organic, and you just have to go, though. And if you've got a leader in house that really truly is like, we are here to serve, we are here to get the team together. I had an old boss that taught me something greatly about team when I was a kid. And she had said, team, together, everybody achieves more. And that's the truth. Like, if you just go off of that, like that's it. So if everybody does it together and everybody can get together and make it happen, like, we can see an exponential growth in anything that we do.
So where do you find yourself? Who are you working with most closely, or in what aspects of the business on a day-to-day basis? Is it from the personnel side, kind of developing that culture? Is it from the, you know, operations side, you know, becoming more efficient, or where do you spend most of your time when you're working with this?
So to answer that question, you kind of have to understand how I run my day 7 days a week. Right now, it's pretty insane. I wake up anywhere from 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. I do all I just recently actually accepted Jesus back into my life. And so I do all my Bible study stuff, my journaling. I journal about 6 or 7 times 6 or 7 into different journals a day. And then I get the day started work-wise sometime about 7-ish. I do the whole 3 days in one day. So every 6 hours, I basically reset and restart my day. So from like, if the math is right, like 7 to 12-ish or so, I'll do one set of workload, and then I'll take lunch, do what I need to do. And then from like 1 to 6, I'll do another set of workload. And then from, 6 to 11, I'll do a separate set. So it allows me to have 3 days in one day. I do that 7 days a week. And so in the morning, there are some times where I have to work with leadership because I've got to, for the companies, because I have to like set emails or respond back to digital marketing stuff, or set kind of the week schedule. And then after lunch, then I'll make some client phone calls. I do a ton of stuff on LinkedIn. Like I'm always direct messaging on LinkedIn. So I've got 3 phones in my laptop, and I have LinkedIn on every single one of those pieces of equipment, because I want to be able to reach back out to clients as fast as possible. And really, once again, if you remember what my position is in life is whether it's personal or professional, I've been allowed to create it so that everything I do all day long exists within each other. So I'll explain it like this. I have a really good client that I've received a bunch of work from contractually for the company. However, my clients are also some of my good friends. And so we're connected on social. And so I might see something about this client on Facebook, and I'll reply back and just make sure that I'm doing something positive, because that's who this client is. They're very positive. So I'll make sure I do something positive in that. And in that realm of influence, that allows me to build a deeper relationship with my client, which then allows me to, get an opportunity to bid a job, which then allows me to get the opportunity to work with my leadership of my company. Does that make sense?
Yeah, full circle. And I think that's important for a lot of, especially contractors, right? To hear, and when I say especially contractors, an even further segmented piece of that is those that are, quite a bit smaller in size and may not be as sophisticated or have the personnel to keep up with stuff like that. But we literally just last week, and it probably won't drop until end of this month or maybe early May, just spoke to somebody else here in Southern California, a HVAC contractor who literally same kind of concept, puts everything out there and has actually hired influencers to work with him. But the inbound he's seeing that from a service standpoint, or service calls, as well as hiring. Yeah, I mean, he's seeing a huge impact on recruiting and hiring just from being out there all the time. And I think that's important for a lot of people to and it might be harder for some of those older school guys and girls to kind of wrap their head around, being that and putting all that kind of stuff out there. But it's how we live now. It
matters, right? It matters. Yeah. Like when we were all out of this experience, this crazy human, experiment that we're running right now, for the past couple of years, I've been telling people like, hey, you got to get out on social, you got to get out on digital. Like this is the direction. And it was the older cats that were always like, no, that's not how we do it. We do it this way. Luckily, I've been the bridge between the millennials and the boomers, right? And so I've able to kind of understand both sides, knowing that we each communicate in different forms. Well, with this whole thing that has now happened, like, it made my life merge. And now all of a sudden,
it's forcing those older school guys to get in that concept. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And it's awesome, because what we're seeing now is we're seeing the older cats that have owned companies going, hey, like we need to figure out new ways to communicate with each other. And those that have a digital platform, or they reach towards that marketing, it's huge, right? Like one of the things that I want to quickly talk about is that for Freestone and B. Taylor, we actually, for those two companies, we stopped going to trade shows over the past couple of years. And we started heavily investing in digital media aspects, and just growing and telling the story and communicating online and doing those things. And we were looked at for a while as like, nobody understood it. Nobody understood why we wouldn't invest in trade shows. Though we want to support the organizations, we were struggling, going, there's something bigger happening here. And then all of a sudden this happened. And now we can't go to trade shows. And now we just pay the line.
Now you're the ones, leading the market there.
We're just going to do it. So.
And I think it brings a level of transparency that people almost expect now, right? It's almost like well, if you're not on social and if you're not showing me this and you're not doing this, what are you hiding, almost kind of thing, where you're probably not hiding anything at all, but that's just not something you're used to. And whereas, somebody who's out there all the time, even if, obviously you're not going to get 100% of people to agree with what you're doing or what you're saying, but either way, you're out there and you're being transparent, and it brings a level of comfortability, I think, now.
Yeah, some would think we're being transparent, right? There's still, when you guys are about the same age as I am, but knowing that I did a social investigation on you and you guys graduated school and college at the same time, right? So I know you guys are very similar in the way that who we are as people, right? And something we always have to remember that is that word of authenticity and transparency. So because we've got digital media, we can be as transparent and authentic as our egos will allow ourselves to be. But keep in mind, those of us that spend time on digital media and have watched and consumed a lot of stuff over the past 15, 20 years, we can see when someone's being inauthentic and when someone's being like really authentic.
Yeah.
And what I'm seeing now is I'm watching these things online going, that seems like a weird, like, authentic in quotes in my head way of doing that, but there's something about this person or thing, that message, that doesn't seem right. And I believe that is our brain in evolutionary aspects that is picking up things that just don't seem right. Because it's much like when you go to buy a car. If you're buying a car from a like sleuthy car salesman, or if you're buying a car from somebody who's just like, yeah, if you want this car because you like it, cool, buy it. Right? The difference. And it's an amazing thing. So by authentic, I hope that those people and those of us that are putting stuff out there can be recognized of when something is authentic and when something is like partially authentic, because I'm just trying to sell you another thing.
Yeah, so true. And kind of touching on that, so circling back to the contractor aspect, what are you seeing or doing, or what kind of things are you guys doing, or that you're doing for these people that you're working with, from a contractor specific standpoint, that you see as being successful, that might be able to help some of these guys out that are not really in that headspace yet?
So what we're doing is really this in March was B. Taylor Painting's 20 years of it being in business. And so what we did was we ended up leading up to it. We did a bunch of videos about the story of B. Taylor Painting. That's it's a really, like, in quotes, American dream type aspect of really a guy just working his butt off to get what it needs to happen. And we started doing that in March, releasing that story. And then we all got this whole social experiment that we're doing right now. And so what we had to do is we had to start focusing on our clients. And our company is not the type that wants to grab the masses. We don't believe that the masses is fully understanding what's going on, and nor do we want to work with the masses, right? There's enough work to go around for everybody. And so we mainly focus on a small select few types of clients in the multifamily industry, both in the apartments, in the affordable housing, and in the common interest development. We're not working with everybody. We don't want to work with everybody because we don't believe that we should be working with everybody. And so in the clients that we work with, we're just making sure that we dive deeper with them, and we ask them questions like, what do you need? Like, what's your biggest challenge? And then we sit and listen. And we sit and listen and watch. Like, I have a really good client that we worked with for several years. I asked her the other day, hey, what is it that you need? What's your biggest struggle, personally or professionally? And she goes, I'm the VP of a company and all my people are good, but I'm trying to figure out how to, like, educate my kids at home. So what did we do? I took that and I said, okay, we're going to send this client a newsletter that has different ways to deal with education of children at home. So we got a newsletter that had a bunch of links on it, and we sent it to her. She replied back and was like, thank you so much. I really appreciated that. It was very timely and valuable. One would look at that and go, how does that pay me? How does that give me a contract? It doesn't directly.
Right.
But remember the bigger picture here, guys. We're about service. Whether that means I need to jump in my car and go buy groceries for you because you've got no time and drive them to your house, or that means you need me to go look at a fire project that just burned down and you need a number right now, it's service.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about, the deeper service. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think you're speaking to a specific, kind of going back on what you were mentioning before about being authentic and the transparency. I think we're starting to see that, especially in terms of this coronavirus, gosh, I don't know, issue that, or whatever that we're going through right now, that, as you say, social experiment.
Yeah.
You know, I think that people, I mean, yes, as business people, yes, we want to sell our product. And I think part of the boomer generation is you don't let people in on what you're dealing with. You power through, you grind until you get it done. And I feel like the millennial generation is quite the opposite. It's like, you know, here's where I'm at, you know, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. Here's how I got there. And I think, you know, to your point, kind of being the bridge between the two, I think what sells today is authenticity, is the ability to see, yeah, this guy, he has a specific business, but he's a human first. He's got a family, or she's got a family. They've got kids, and they got to figure out how they're going to get through their day to day, especially today, in terms of, you know, numbers that I'm hearing in terms of unemployment, you know, continually rising, and the fears that are associated with that, and going to the grocery store and having to wear masks and gloves and things like that. You know, I think there's a greater, deeper issue. And then at the end of the day, it's, you know, when things start to come back to normal, you say, who do I want to do business with? Who do I want to associate myself with on a day-to-day basis? And it's this guy who was willing to, you know, give me some pointers on how to teach my kids, because I couldn't do that. You know what I mean? And
100%, man. Everything you're saying is dead on. And I think it's in my opinion, I think that's my truth. Like, it's really important to understand and recognize what's going on. And in my belief, you know, you said mentally, emotionally, spiritually. So I have this thing that I caught on the other day, and it's called MEPS, right? So it's mental health, emotional health, physical health, and spiritual health. Those four things really matter in this life, right? And so when I look at the fear and I look at what we're doing, I spend a lot of time researching the brain and observing the human habitual process. And so let's look past the financial. We're 17 million job loss. We've got some weird social experiment that we're doing right now with lots of losses of life that are happening, not just in the US, like globally. This is a problem. We've got mass amounts of media that are unable to properly report the real truth about the situation. Now, let's say we magically get lifted in a couple weeks and we all have to go back to work. We have a really human issue, brain-wise and habitual-wise, that we have to respond to as humans and professionals, is that we've all been locked in a house for a couple weeks now. We have concerns about our health. We have concerns about our financial wherewithal with our businesses. That's what I'm focusing on. My position is to live 5 to 6 months out from today. That's where I spend most of my time right now for my companies. We're currently booked out until late summer. However, I need to know after the summer what happens next. How do I do that? Contractually, I have to focus on what are the possibilities of the next level of this. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
And so it's super important when you use the word sell, right? It's not even sell. It's just telling your story, putting yourself out there. The further and the faster that you do it, the better view those guys like us are going to have to go, wait a second, there's opportunity here. So let me see how that works. And it's not taking advantage of opportunity. It's moving at a speed at which matters for our clients and for us, that says we're going to live a couple of months ahead to see where this thing's going to shake out. And when it does shake out, we're going to shoot out of this thing like a rocket. That's
so you guys, yeah. And so, yeah, so you said you guys are pretty scheduled out. So you're not seeing any, and I would imagine, I don't know what Freestone does. And actually to kind of, I've actually talked to, I don't remember who it was at B-Tailor, but the name sounds really familiar. Because we do insurance, so I think I've talked to somebody at B-Tailor at one point. You guys, they have an operation in Idaho as well, right?
Yeah, so our corporate office is out of Idaho, but we have a team down in Orange County, and then we have a paint team, and then we have a paint team out of Fremont and the GC company out of Fremont, both. So we have 3 different divisions with our corporate office out of Idaho.
So, you guys, it seems like you guys are staying pretty busy now. And so what does forecasting look like? You're working 5-6 months ahead. How do you see it all shaking out? what is your hypothesis on it, as we move forward and out of this?
Right. So appreciate that. So everybody is currently working day to day, right? So we have our main leadership that's working day to day, calling on our current clients, really focusing on contracts that are considered essential, really focusing on a lot of the pre-production thing. Like that's what they're focusing on right now. In 5 or 6 months from now, what I personally see is I see a rolling economy, and I see a rolling relief. So what I think will happen is in California, May-ish or so, I see we're going to get a little bit more extension on this thing we've got, these rules that we've got, right? Because nobody really has an understanding of what's happening with this virus, right? And so, to explain it fully, I have to get a little bit into the virus aspect and experience to then say this is what's going to happen contractually. And so that's going to roll out May, June. By June, we're going to have a really big challenge in the economics of the globe and in the US. And so we're going to have a big decision coming forward that says, do we let the economy do what it's going to do and continue to reach these bottoms? Like right now, what do we have, like 17 million people out of work or that have lost their jobs?
Yeah.
And so does that continue to climb, or do we slowly start to roll out the essential and release the pressure from this, and we start to do more work in construction in California? Like construction in California, I don't know the numbers because I'm not a stats guy, but they're one of the largest economies of the state, right?
Yeah.
In construction. Okay. Yeah. So with that being said, we have to release that. We've got powers that be that are fighting, lobbyists that are fighting Sacramento and doing these things, right? But we have a life safety issue. So I actually think that we're going to get a bend in some of the rules and openness, maybe end of May, early June. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start seeing some of the initial contracts that we already had signed and ready to go. That's going to start. So then July, August, September, we're going to start now working on the projects that we're just currently getting signed. Like if somebody signs a contract today, we're going to start working on those projects then. And so in the 5 to 6 month time, there's going to be like a release of contracts that'll happen. Now, those of us that are working, like actively working, because financially we were able to, because we prepared for this, we're going to be swamped for like 6 to 8 months, maybe even to a year. And then everybody else that signs contracts later on in this year are going to get pushed into 2021.
Yeah.
And so now we're pushing that out. And so that's what I think is going to happen. But then we've got the opportunity of the virus coming back into play, where all of a sudden we're going to release the pressure of the economics with contract signing, but then we're going to have the pressure of health, life, and safety come back again. So we're going to potentially see an increase and spike of this virus coming back. And that's the part where I'm like still very cloudy, because I'm like, everybody is saying, from what I can tell, the only way really out of this thing is whether we just receive a vaccine to fight this thing, or we start to move towards healthy modes to fight this. We wash our hands, we do whatever we need to do. There's still the humanistic challenge we have to move past, which means you have to feel safe enough to go back to work.
Yeah, I definitely think that part of it, even when it does get deemed by the powers that be safe and whatnot, and like as you put it, some of that pressure is relieved. I think there is definitely a human aspect, like you're saying, there's going to be a lot of caution, and there's going to be a lot of skepticism and treading lightly, if you will, on how to go about that.
Yeah, and there are ways, and you have to get I always think of that graph. That's the innovation graph, where you have the early adopters, the innovators, and then you have that chasm. Then you have the bell curve, which is the majority, right? You have to get across that chasm. And the only way to get across the chasm to the majority is to have a bunch of innovators and early adopters go, it's going to be okay. Let me show you the way.
Yep.
Right? Like we're a GC company working in the most weirdest economical time that we've seen ever in my professional career. However, we're still working, we're still doing things. And if by working means administrative stuff, leadership stuff, training things like financial, there's so many things we could tighten up our belts with.
Yeah, or even developing relationships, right? I mean, it's a great time for a lot of those smaller companies that even if they're not working, using the time to find a different way of communication, be it the social or digital marketing or whatever it is, or even just reaching out to your clients and maintaining those relationships.
Yeah. And then let's not even talk about like the jobs that don't return when we get back, right? Like the new normal, that the new normal is going to be abnormal as such. So what jobs are not going to return because we realize we no longer need them? What offices are not going to be there because we realize we don't have the financials to carry that office? And everybody that said we can't work from home have now magically figured out how to work from home.
That's what we talk about all the time. I was talking to my buddy who's in commercial or in real estate, but said, I'd hate to be in commercial real estate when this thing is all over, because all those companies that, were on the edge, hey, we're not really sure if we can make it work from home, and all of a sudden you're forced to, and now it's operating. You may have had some speed bumps and some things some obstacles to clear and whatnot, but you're finding a way to make it work. And, do I need all 30,000 square feet of my office space when we come back to this? It's just, I'm fascinated to kind of run my mind through all the different scenarios and different things that are going to happen when we get back to quote unquote normal, if we ever do.
Yeah. And you can, right? We can architect it in our brains. Like I've been told my mind works a lot like how people think in physics. Like I go to the end and I say, what does it look like? What do I want it to look like? What could it look like? And then I work all the analogies and systems backwards. And I say, okay, what has to happen to get that?
Yep.
It's a very much like Peter Diamandis, abundance, Peter Thiel, Musk type of thought process where I go through and say like, what is it going to take to get to Mars? Really? What's it going to take to like really be a successful business owner at the end of all of this? And who's going to have to be gone, and what things do we have to eliminate to get to where really it's bottom line thinking is what we're talking about. And if you're strategic with that bottom line thinking and you make sure that you surround yourself with the right people, that is going to be success for all of us, as long as we don't go back to the flashy cars and the shiny, shiny rings and the things that we all thought were very important, but really aren't. Right now, what's most important, in my opinion?
Toilet paper.
Making sure, yeah. The real life, though, real joke. When people started buying that, I see exactly what's going on. Like, the cost. It's the biggest thing in the store that is the cheapest, and so they're going to grab that. Nobody really thought to themselves, why am I doing it? And then you have herd mentality, herd thinking.
Yep.
We were blessed. My wife and I had a daughter who ended up in the hospital in 2017 with a brain. She was bleeding in her brain. We had no idea. We were running around a park. She ended up having an 11.5-hour surgery. She's doing well now. But we were blessed in 2017 to be going through this whole process before we even got to today, to 2020, right? And when we went to Thailand in December for 5 weeks, and we spent 5 weeks together, my wife, myself, and my kids, and we just traveled. While we were out there, we were blessed to really start tightening up our belt financially, mentally, emotionally, everything. So when we got to today and we started dealing with this experiment of herd mentality, we sat back and we watched the TV and watched everybody crack jokes on social about it. But my wife and I had a deep conversation, and she goes, why is this happening? And I was like, it's cost. Like, people want to just buy the biggest thing in the store. Do they need that toilet paper? No. Guess how long you could live, a family of 4, off of a couple rolls of toilet paper? Pretty long.
Oh, yep. Yeah.
But they did it because they're not paying attention, right? Like they're not. And I still see it. I see people post all the time about how much they're drinking and what's going on at partying and da-da-da. And I look at it and go, do you realize what alcohol does to your immunity system? And do you realize what could happen if you did get the virus and it attacked your system? Like, holy smokes, man. Like, let's pay a little bit more attention to it. I'm glad you're having a couple bottles of wine and having a good time, but let's really think about what the opportunity we have here. And in my opinion, it's to get better mentally, to focus physically, like emotionally. Like let's tighten the belts here financially and get this thing happen. So
yeah, for sure.
But I'm not a judge, not a jury, and just somebody watching from the sidelines.
It's definitely fun to watch. Like you said, it's definitely a human experiment, if you will. Unfortunately, at the cost of some lives, obviously, but hopefully it does get under control. It
is, and it will. It always will. I was talking to a guy in Ghana this past week.
Oh yeah, me too. That's what I do on the weekends. So.
insanity, right? This is my life. I'm the guy with a blue mohawk. Like, this is the insane. So I'm in a Bible study every morning, and this gentleman was on. We had him preaching to us, and we had talked to him, and something he said to me like blew my mind, because every time over the past couple of weeks, people have been going, it's not that big of a deal. It's not that big of a deal. Like, don't get worked up about it. And I'm like, wait a second. So I'm sitting on this video chat with this guy from Ghana, right? And he says, we said, how many people are, have died and da-da-da. He said a couple hundred are diagnosed with this virus. And he goes, but here's the thing, guys. He said, it's about humans, right? And he says, and he's a priest or pastor, and his wife is a doctor. And they both received their degrees in the States, and they chose to move out to Ghana, to this village, to start this hospital, like a small hospital. And he said, he's like, the crazy thing is like, we know we could go to the US and we could go to another country and we can make a lot of money. He says, but we're here serving, right? And he says, and the other day, my wife went to go to work, and before she left the house, she didn't have her mask on. And I told her, honey, you have to put your mask on. Like, this is the way that it'll help. And she literally looked at me and was like, oh, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. And he goes, and I looked at her and said, you have loved ones to care for, right? Like, there are people you have to protect. And if you get sick or you get the virus or you get something, all this goes away. And so we really have to be thinking more about each other and the importance of it, and stop downplaying this process that we're going through. Because the reality is, it's, even if you think it's not that big at all, here's the reality. People are losing their jobs. People are losing their companies. Some people are losing their minds, and there's going to be loss and sickness. So when we get out of all this, like, what's the true opportunity that we've had during this time period? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think there's definitely a challenge for some people in exactly what you're saying, in that selfless mentality, because, and I mean, I'm not a doctor and I'm not an expert in any of this stuff, but so many people are asymptomatic in this and don't really care if they get it, I guess, is one way, because they figure, it's not gonna, I'm healthy, I'm otherwise whatever, but they don't realize that there's other people that, you're really not doing it for yourself. Even if you're confident you're going to be healthy and you're going to be fine, you're not really doing it for yourself. So it's really an act of selflessness, or a test of, human selflessness, to be able to follow these guidelines and do what needs to be done to take care of it.
Yeah, man. And that's what you guys are doing. Like, I'm looking at my screen right now and it says it happened on the job. So if we just put that question in, right, you guys are doing a service. You're doing a service by allowing my ideas, or the ideas that are being given to me, to be put out into your network and your world, right? All of this actually happened on the job. So I could tell you a cool story about, where somebody shot themselves in the foot, and, they had to go make an insurance claim, do whatever thing that happened on a job site. The reality is this happened on the job.
Yeah. And that's what we're finding out. Honestly, we started this as hey, let's hear some funny stories about, things that happened while people were working, but it's turned into, hey, let's hear about your story and how your story is unique, and the other stories that the entertaining ones, the ones that are real life, just end up coming out. So it works out on both sides, man. I got to tell you, we're a little bit pleasantly surprised at how fun this has been, and how how it's kind of skewed from what we initially thought. But it's great. Yeah, and we appreciate having guys like you on too. It's we like I said at the beginning, our concept was contractors, but we're finding that there are so many people connected to the contractors world that fit into what we're doing here, and we really appreciate having somebody like you on.
That's awesome, man. I appreciate that. I'm gonna have to have you guys on ours. My podcast is a digital legacy. Been doing it for a couple of years, and it's just been always random people. Like by nature, by life, by creativity. I always talk to my wife. I'm like, I'm a storyteller, right? And she's like, be careful when you say story, because people think that they're lies and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm also a teller of stories and a questions of stories. Like, everything is combined with a story. And if you share that story, your truth, you will quickly recognize that the more you share, the more authenticity actually comes out, not just from yourself, but everybody else that you surround yourself with. because you start to have that connection, like the old fire and hearth, right? You sit around. I did a TED talk one time about living a digital legacy. And the cue is that you essentially can sit around a fire like they used to do in tribe days. And the old Native Americans used to sit knee to knee, shoulder to shoulder. And they would sit around and listen to the stories, and they would have a connection from that centered fire. And that's what you're doing. We're really just shining that light from there. So
yeah.
And I appreciate you guys for doing it, because I've had a great time and love what's going on for you. So yeah.
Yeah, well, we appreciate it, man. We'll let you run and get back to one of your 3 days in one. we don't want to screw up that schedule. It sounds like that's hectic enough for you already.
It is, man, but it is what it is. Right now we're training to do a 200-mile run. So on November 20th, 2020, I'm going to run 200 miles straight. So it should be about 80 hours worth of time.
Well, we'll be there cheering you on.
Oh, that's what I need. That's why I mentioned
Definitely not going to be there by your side, but
hey, less than a year ago, I was sitting, overweight and 270 something pounds. Hadn't run a marathon. I went from a 5K to a half marathon to a marathon to 50 miles to 60 miles to 100 miles in a year. So
that's crazy.
It was all because of my optimal health goal.
It's one of these ultra marathons, right? Is that?
Yeah. Now they call it
a weekend or something like that.
Yeah, now they call me an ultra runner, ultra marathon, and I'm just like, I'm just Kev. Like, I go by the AK of Blue Hawk 100, and it just happens. So whatever.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Well, again, we appreciate it. Before we go, let's let the people figure out how to find you, or obviously we can just Google you, but are there websites or phone numbers or emails or anything that you use for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, man. If you just Google Keven Hempel, you can find me there on the websites. Freestone Reconstruction on Facebook, and any of the social platforms we're there. Freestone Reconstruction out of Fremont, and then B. Taylor Painting on LinkedIn, like all that stuff. They can just find me there. But literally, I have yet to find another person with my spelling, Keven, and then my last name, Hempel. So if they want to reach out, my cell phone is there. Go to LinkedIn, search me there, connect with me. Send me a text, send me a direct message, like whatever. I'm available all the time. And, I have this thinking and thought thing in my head that says, like, through the use of social media, if we can positively affect over 1 billion people, then like that would be a pretty cool thing to do before we leave this earth. So why not try that? And how we're going to do it is by social, by doing things that you guys are doing. Like, thank you so much for having me here. And I love what you guys are doing. I just want you to keep going. And if there's any way that I can help you, like, just let me know. So,
yeah, awesome. We will stay in touch for sure. And we appreciate it again. And have a great day. Stay safe. And we'll catch you somewhere, maybe at the finish line of that 200 miles.
Love it. Would love to meet you guys. Love to meet you guys. And welcome to the tribe.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Keven.
Have a good one.
You too.
Hey, thanks for listening. And if you've made it this far, go ahead and give us a like or 5 stars or whatever means you like us.
Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next episode. And check out our website for more video content and extras.
While you're there, shoot us a message if you want to be a guest. We'd love to have you on.
Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.